Hello everyone, I'm Minoxen and this is episode 4 of my War Thunder Spotlight series. Today I'll be taking a look at the M3 Grant and Lee. They have plenty in common and play nearly identically, so covering both at the same time shouldn't be too bad. I'll do my best to discuss them both fully. Both the Lee and Grant are a 2.7 battle rating American medium tank, with the Lee as a tier 1 and the Grant as tier 2. To break these tanks down, I'm going to use the holy trinity of tank design: armor, firepower, and mobility. We'll start with armor. For a 2.7 battle rating, these guys have some fairly serious armor. The 51mm of frontal hull armor are sloped, while the middle plate drops to 38mm. The sloping keeps the average frontal armor to around 60. On the turret is where we find the first difference between the Grant and the Lee. The Grant features the redesigned 37mm turret, which now houses the radio box. It also received increased armor on its front and removed the upper machine gun from the commander's cupola in exchange for a smoke launcher that is unfortunately not in the game. The 76mm of armor on the turret make it much harder to penetrate than the Lee's 51, and the machine gun cupola's removal offers a bit more survivability versus the Lee. The side armor on both are 38mm thick, and while the Grant receives sand skirts, they offer no actual protection. The turret sides and rear are 51mm thick all around. And finally, the rear hull is 38mm thick for both. These tanks have a few weak points, but the largest for both has to be the 75mm gun. Directly above and below the 75mm barrel, your armor is only an effective 46mm thick. The same weakness exists right below and above the 37mm cannon as well, but its armor is only 38mm thick. The Lee's commander's cupola is definitely more of a weakness than the Grant's due to the additional height and thinner armor. And as it is a large tank, it's tough to conceal with camo, but shrouding the 75 and the 37 can offer a bit of help on fouling the enemy's aim for those weak spots. As a multi-cannon tank, this vehicle's firepower is potentially devastating, and we'll discuss that now, in the firepower section. The M3 is equipped with a 37mm M5 cannon mounted in the turret, and a 75mm M2 cannon mounted in the sponson. The 37mm cannon is the primary gun for aiming, and by default both guns fire with the same button. To get the most out of this duo of cannons, you'll need to go into the settings and set up some extra controls to use each cannon independently. If you're good at micromanagement, you can keep a constant stream of shells on target, or possibly even 2 targets. To set up your weapons, go to Controls, Tank Controls, Weaponry, and then set up your Select Primary, Select Secondary, and Reset Selection buttons. Be sure to set them to something that you can easily access without disrupting the movement or your aim. With plenty of practice, you can effectively produce 2 tanks worth of firepower. The 37mm can depress -7 degrees, while the 75mm can depress -9. And both guns have an elevation of 60 degrees. The 37mm turret rotates at 18 degrees per second, which allows you to use it to respond to threats when immobilized, and the 75mm slews at near the same rate, but with a much more narrow field of fire. The 37 reloads at a rate of 2.9 seconds, and the 75mm reloads in approximately 4.9 seconds, which are both good in respect to its tier and battle rating. Firing on the move is unreliable, but I do hope the developers will add the stabilization to the guns, since both guns featured it historically, but it's a relatively new feature, so it may be a while before they add them. The 37mm has 2 types of ammunition. The armor-piercing has the most penetration, while the armor-piercing capped round has the less likelihood to ricochet. The 75mm has 4 types of ammo, but the 2 most important are the M61 shot with its explosive filler and the M72 armor-piercing round. The other 2 shells are high explosive shell for killing an open-top vehicle, and the smoke round for supporting zone captures and denying enemy line of sight. The Lee and Grant hold differing amounts of shells, but both tanks' ammo racks are a bit of a mess. There are a total of 8 racks, but the game ignores which rack is for which gun, and it's fairly fruitless to even bother attempting to empty any of these, so I'll just suggest keeping them full, or reducing your ammo to an amount where you can consistently make it through a match without any issues. For mobility, you're going to be one of the slower movers in your battle rating. The stats card shows a speed of 39 km per hour, and while you can get there, it may take a little bit. On average, you'll be in the lower 30s with a reverse speed of -5. Adjusting your heading will be quite slow by comparison to other vehicles at your tier. Neutral turning gets you around 11.6 degrees per second, while turning on the move nets you up to 13 degrees per second. Its hill climbing is reasonable, but its thin tracks will mean that it's easy to slip if you try turning. To wrap things up, the Lee and Grant both have quite good armor for the battle rating and will often absorb damage like a heavy tank from the front at 1.7 to 3.0. Firepower gets high marks with an amazing potential rate of fire, and good shell selection for both guns. Now I want to say that its mobility is somewhat average, but a lot of the lower ranked vehicles that you'll be competing against can easily outmaneuver you, so I'm going to give it a bad rating here. And with the Trinity over, I'll recommend some vehicles for your 2.7 lineup. For mobility, there's either the M22 Locust with its tiny profile, or the M4A5 Stuart for a bit more survivability. For tank destroyers, there are two options, the M8 and the 75mm gun motor carriage. Anti-air goes to the M16 and its quad 50 caliber machine guns. Unfortunately for lawnmowers, there really isn't much in the multiple kill category, but the Dauntless carries a large payload and has some decent armaments. And for air superiority, there are a few options, but I prefer the P40E1 with 650 cals and some bomb payload over the P400. And now, here's some gameplay tips for the Lee and Grant. First and most important, pay attention to the battle rating of your match using the battle rating to spawn points chart I've included below. From 1.7 to 2.7 you're a very heavily armored tank with only a few tanks that can readily pierce your frontal armor. At 3.0 to 3.7 that list of tank increases dramatically, and you'll need to change your playstyle to make yourself more of a tank destroyer, relying on your 75mm. Remember, it's very important to set up your controls for independent fire. It's the best way to succeed in this tank. Play kinda like you're a heavy tank, plan your route and know how enemies can flank you. And finally, be patient and stay calm. Mastering the M3 can be a struggle, but if you can do it, you're going to have some great games. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below with your suggestions and thoughts. Also, come visit me on Twitch and Twitter. If you enjoyed this and would like to see more, check the description or annotation for a link to my Tank Spotlight playlist. War Thunder is free to play, and if you want to try it out, please use my referral link in the description to support the channel. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you next time.